What if the true map of your later years isn't drawn by the grand, celebrated events, the retirement parties, the milestone birthdays, the family gatherings, but in the hushed, shadowy corners of your own mind, in decisions so quiet they barely register as choices at all, yet whose cumulative weight ultimately determines whether you will float through your 8th and 9th decades with a profound sense of peace and purpose, or find yourself anchored in a deepening pool of quiet regret, a spectator to a life that feels increasingly like it belongs to someone else? This is the central, unsettling truth of aging that most dare not voice. After 70, your happiness is almost never hijacked by a single catastrophic event, but is instead slowly, meticulously constructed or eroded by a series of silent, internal verdicts you deliver to yourself when no one is watching. Verdicts about who you allow in your presence, what story you believe you are living, how you negotiate with your own physical form, where you direct your precious attention, and what you believe you are leaving behind in the wake of your journey. These are the 5 silent decisions, the unseen architects of your destiny, and ignoring their power is the greatest risk you now face. The first of these silent decisions, and perhaps the most emotionally treacherous, is the choice to curate your circle with unflinching intentionality, or to cope indefinitely with a crowd that drains your spirit. A decision that plays out not in dramatic confrontations, but in the passive acquiescence of answering that phone call from the perpetually negative relative out of sheer guilt, or in tolerating the friend whose companionship feels more like an emotional transaction where you are always the one paying, or in accepting that loneliness within a marriage or family dynamic is just your inevitable lot. A decision that whispers to you that politeness and endurance are virtues when, in this season of life, they can be slow-acting poisons because time is no longer a vast expanse to be filled, but a dwindling, precious currency, and every moment spent in the company of those who diminish your light, who gossip instead of inspire, who take rather than reciprocate, is a moment stolen from the connections that truly nourish, the laugh that comes from deep in your belly, the shared silence that comforts, the mutual respect that energizes. And this curation is not an act of cruelty, but the ultimate act of self-respect, a declaration that your peace, your joy, your serenity are non-negotiable, and that the privilege of sharing your dwindling time is the highest honor you can bestow, an honor that must be earned. The second silent decision, which often masquerades as compliance or practicality, is the choice to remain the author of your own unfolding narrative, or to quietly accept a role as a secondary character in someone else's story. A decision that crystallizes when your well-meaning adult child reorganizes your kitchen without asking, implying you are no longer capable, or when you defer to a physician without question, surrendering your autonomy to their authority, or when you swallow that controversial opinion at a family dinner to keep the peace, or when you abandon a long-held dream of travel or learning because someone commented it was unrealistic at your age. A decision that happens in the tiny surrenders where you allow others to write your lines, direct your scenes, and define your purpose, shrinking your world to fit their expectations and their convenience. And the antidote is not rebellion for its own sake, but a quiet, persistent recommitment to your own agency, to whispering to yourself, "My script isn't finished," and then proving it by enrolling in that online course about astrophysics, by planning that solo trip to the national park, by writing that memoir even if only your grandchildren will read it, by insisting on managing your own finances for as long as you are able, by being the one who decides what your day, your week, your life contains. Because the moment you stop being the author is the moment your story loses its unique tension, its compelling plot, its reason to turn the page. The third silent decision, a daily negotiation with reality, is the choice to schedule your ache or to let your ache schedule you. A subtle but monumental shift in perspective where you acknowledge that pain, stiffness, and fatigue are now fellow travelers on your journey. But you fiercely decide whether they will be the navigators or merely passengers you have learned to manage. A decision evident in the moment you wake up and, feeling the familiar protest in your joints, decide the entire day will be a write-off, canceling your plans and retreating to your chair, versus the moment you acknowledge the discomfort. Address it directly with your morning routine of gentle movement, medication or meditation, and then decisively. You look at the clock and say, from 9 a.m. to noon, this body and I are going to the botanical gardens. And you, ache, are welcome to come along. But you will not be in charge. A psychological maneuver that transforms you from a patient defined by your ailments into a person living a full life who happens to be managing a body. A reclaiming of the agenda that is absolutely vital for mental survival because it places you back in the driver's seat, asserting that while your body may have its limitations, your spirit and your schedule do not have to be equally constrained. The fourth silent decision, which separates a life of depth from one of mere distraction, is the choice to cultivate marrow interests or to settle for the anesthetic of surface-level engagement. A fork in the road you encounter every time you face a blank afternoon. Do you reach for the remote and succumb to the passive, numbing scroll of television? Or do you reach for the challenging book on philosophy that makes your mind work? Do you choose the gossipy chat with a neighbor? Or do you steer the conversation toward a shared memory you can mine for deeper meaning? Do you consume culture, or do you attempt to create it? However humbly, by learning to paint, to play an instrument, to write poetry, to garden with an eye for heirloom varieties. Because marrow interests are those that tap directly into the core of your curiosity, that require cognitive effort and emotional investment, that come with the risk of frustration and the glorious reward of mastery, however small, and they are the most potent defense against the creeping sense of irrelevance, the feeling that the world has passed you by. For when you are engaged in a marrow interest, you are not just passing time, you are expanding your inner universe. You are growing, and growth is the undeniable signature of a life still being lived, not merely endured. The fifth and most profound silent decision, which shapes your perspective on your entire existence, is the choice to pursue legacy moments over legacy monuments, a fundamental redefinition of what it means to leave something behind, where you shift your energy from building a static thing, a named scholarship, a published book, a monetary inheritance, which is a monument, to planting living seeds in the hearts and minds of others through intangible, often unrecorded interactions, which are legacy moments. A decision to value the half hour spent teaching your grandchild how to whittle a piece of wood, sharing the story of where you learned it, over simply leaving them the woodworking tools in your will. A decision to prioritize the act of forgiving an old grievance and freeing both parties from its weight over being remembered as someone who never backed down. A decision to impart a specific piece of hard-won wisdom, a quirky family tradition, a way of seeing beauty in the mundane, in the soft, private spaces between you and another human being. Because a monument stands alone and gathers dust, its meaning fixed and eventually forgotten, while a moment replicates, it echoes. It becomes a part of someone else's story. It changes how they see the world. And in that change, your essence, your values, your love continue to propagate forward in time, far beyond the reach of any plaque or named building, making your legacy not a footnote in history, but a living, breathing force in the ongoing human narrative. These 5 decisions: curation over crowd, authorship over assignment, scheduling your ache over surrendering to it, marrow over distraction, moments over monuments, are the silent, daily plebiscites of your later life, conducted in the private voting booth of your consciousness. and they require a vigilance that the world will never encourage you to maintain. For society will loudly advise you on investments and medications and estate planning, but it will remain stubbornly, dangerously silent on these psychological and spiritual pivots, leaving you to navigate them alone, which is why you must bring them into the light, name them, and confront them with deliberate courage. Because your happiness after 70 is not a condition that happens to you. It is a country you must build yourself, brick by silent brick, decision by unseen decision, and the blueprint, hidden in plain sight within your own choices, is the only map you will ever need.